And now, Mr. Serling.
Next week, we invite you to take a strange journey back in time with Mr. Gig Young, who tries to make the exodus of all men in their desperate attempt to relive the past. We offer a most bizarre story called Walking Distance, and we hope you'll be around to share it with us. Thank you, and good night.
You're not going to talk to me about Oasis cigarettes? God damn it, Rod.
We have sitting Serling this week. Sitting nonchalant
He's
Serling.
very casual. Yeah, he's very casual.
He almost looks a little bit bored. I feel like he's not got his heart into this one.
I don't know. I feel like he's just casually assured. I don't feel like he's ever
maybe.
He told the director, hey, I've got a dinner res down the street with my wife, and I've got 5 minutes. Let's crank this out now.
Serling, I saw your wife at the restaurant. No, I'm sorry, wrong video.
Yeah.
Forget that. She was having a survey circuit. No, we won't do that one either.
How many of these can we wombo combo together?
Yeah, I was going to say, there's not enough bread for this kind of conversation.
Bread.
Yep.
That's much too low a rating for all this bread stuff as the Crystal.
Yeah, I don't know how I'm feeling about this. I don't think we've got enough.
Now, keep in mind context, gentlemen, because
True.
I did set this up to be the final episode of our original of Twilight Zone.
That's true.
And it's in my favorites list, so
Yeah.
it
We already
can't
had
be
quite a
that
few
bad.
stunners. We've had an episode that you would literally move to tears for as well. We've seen that,
Yeah.
and you're saying this is the climax of everything. So okay.
I'm not saying it's better than that.
Oh,
but
okay. Frank.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
You have seen this one before, Frank, right?
I have,
40 years
I
ago,
have.
you said.
It has been an extremely long time, but as a child, I did watch the opening, basically season of Twilight Zone. It was my babysitter, and I'm going to pretend like I haven't seen this one, but I have seen this one, and I am going to pre-rate it very high, and I'm going to tell you I am going to enjoy it. I don't know if I'm going to cry.
We'll make you cry.
Or I could. Ooh. But this is going to be an easy layup 9+.
A 9+.
Wild.
He's 9+ about the episode.
Oh, very good.
Idol. What do you think about this episode?
Your enthusiasm, and I appreciate this has got me a bit of hype. I don't know much about it, and I'm feeling like I'm encroaching on 7 territory because I'm not sure what to expect. But you're hyping it up, so I'm gonna take that up to an 8. I'm gonna say, this is we're for this first run of Twilight Zones. I feel like you're not gonna end us on a bit of a disappointment. So I'll go for an 8, and hopefully that will only get higher by the end of the episode. Stars.
See, the thing is, there wasn't a lot of context clues there as to what this is about, so it's hard to make a proper judgment. But Mr. Serling looked casual. He looked relaxed. He did not have to sell me cigarettes. He's in his lane. He's driving. He's got his tunes on. Do not break the window. I'm going to go with an 8.5. Maybe I'm just riding the high of the previous episode, but I don't know. I also Walking Distance. That's an evocative title. I feel like there's ways we can go with that. So I'll be optimistic. I will.
It's a show about
I will
bus
throw
stops.
my. It's. You know what? I bet you Ross Serling could make that compelling.
Hell yeah.
8.5. I believe in Mr. Serling. That's my pre-rating.
Otto.
This episode is just really beautiful, beautifully shot, beautifully acted. The original score by Bernard Herrmann is the guy who wrote the theme song for Twilight Zone, but he's prolific songwriter. He did Psycho, North by Northwest,
wow.
a lot of big titles from that time.
Psycho's iconic.
I will be surprised if I'm the only one that rates this a 10 at the end. That's how strongly I think that this episode does. So I'm going to leave us off on a quote from the producer, Buck Houghton. From the start, there was a feeling that this show was something special. There was a fortunate conspiracy of arts and crafts that came to bear on that picture. The good fortunes of casting, the good fortunes of direction. Gig Young was just superb. The sets were absolutely magnificent for a half-hour show. There were a lot of good vibes coming out of the material as you encountered it. All the way up and down the line, it's a beauty. So if you're watching along, go watch this before you listen to the rest of our review. You won't regret it.
See you on the other side.
This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call the Twilight Zone.
Welcome everyone to the Holodeck, our intrepid trek through things that are not so Star Trek. This episode is the final part of our first run of the Twilight Zone episodes that Auto has curated for us. And as always, why have you brought this episode to us? Something, episode called Walking Distance, which is so close yet so far. Why did you bring this as the final part to conclude our run of this batch of Twilight Zone episodes?
Well, this could have gone with the classics up front, but I feel like it doesn't. It doesn't have an iconic shot like Shatner and the monster at 20,000 feet, Nightmare at 20,000 feet. Doesn't have an iconic line really like Burgess Meredith. And there was time now at the end of Time Enough at Last, but it is still very well known, and it's one of my favorites. But the concept is so timeless, I thought it would go here. And I told you I would do the
concept is so timeless, huh?
Yeah.
Yes. I told you I'd do the breakdown of the episode, but actually J.J. Abrams is going to do it for me. Do you guys remember his Time interview from 2009, right before Star Trek 09 came out, where he said he wasn't a Star Trek fan and he didn't really get it? You remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that one, yeah.
Yeah, Trek fans all remember that one. He also had some more stuff to say in that interview. Quote, Walking Distance is maybe the show's best episode. It's about a businessman. He's almost 40. He's got a suit, and he hates his life. He's miserable. The stress of work is just getting him down. And his car breaks down in the middle of nowhere countryside. He goes to the gas station to get his car fixed, and he realizes that he grew up very close to where they are. It's walking distance. So he says, I'm just going to take a walk back to the town I grew up in. He gets there, and he soon realizes he's walked back not just to where he grew up, but when he grew up. He's back in the time when he was a kid, and it's just this beautiful story of a guy who, as an adult, needs to go back to his young self and tell him just to be aware of what it is to be alive, to be young, and to enjoy that. And of course, you can never go back and tell yourself that. It's a beautiful demonstration of the burden of adulthood, told in The Twilight Zone, which everyone thinks is a scary show, but it's actually a beautiful show. The Twilight Zone at its best is better than anything else I've ever seen on television. And you know what? I kind of actually agree with JJ. The more I've watched of it recently, I've watched it a couple times now recently in prepping for this series, and just because I've enjoyed it, and the more I read about it, the more I watch it, the more I like it. And it doesn't really have the high consistent quality of some other shows, but the highs are just really high. And I think this is a beautiful, like I said at the top, really beautiful episode for a number of reasons.
Let me talk about a thought I've often had. And this really brought it back to me, was I've often thought, because I've had a bit of a past, like my childhood wasn't such a happy one, but I've often thought about going, like, what would happen if I went back in time as myself to those moments and was talking to my mother or my father and seeing myself as a child in those situations. Like, what would it be like? How would I present myself to myself, or how would I present myself to my parents? And like, you know, what would I talk about? How would I see themselves? Because, you know, as a child, you see your parents in a different light, and thinking now, like, as an adult and probably being older than them when they were at that time, like, you know, how would you present? It's definitely a thought that I've had many times, and this sort of episode sort of brought it back to go like, wow, this is, I'm not the only one that's had that thought, and seeing it in kind of story form in a very kind of understanding way. And the way I'm very happy that the dad at the end just kind of went, oh yeah, I know who you are, and things that don't make sense, and they can actually have a chat. Like, and I talk to my dad now, but having a talk to my dad back when he was my age would be something different entirely. And it's a shame, you know, we don't get those opportunities to have a mature conversation with someone your own age that is related to you. Is certainly something.
Now you talk.
So actually, the Oscar winner Gig Young, who plays Martin Sloan, is actually 5 years older than his father's actor in this episode, Frank Overton. So nice. That is an interesting dynamic.
What did he win the Oscar for? Oh, sorry.
No,
I'll look that up while you talk.
Okay.
It was interesting casting for a 36-year-old man that really looked like he was doing well in his 50s. Because some of you watching this may be 36 and look in the mirror and go, damn, is that what I look like?
I feel good. Yeah, I'm 39 and I feel great.
If you showed up to your 10-year-old self, do you think that you would immediately recognize and vice versa? Your 10-year-old self would go, hey, I don't look so bad. Or would he go, ah, shit, what happened to my hair?
Yeah. My 16-year-old self would say that, but maybe not my 10-year-old self. Definitely.
So he won Best Supporting Actor in the 1970 movie They Shoot Horses, Don't They?
Oh, okay.
Never heard of it.
Carousel horses, obviously.
An Oscar win is an Oscar win.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
So I don't know. This is one of those episodes that I think might hit differently depending on your age. I'm turning 30 in exactly 22 days. So I don't know. Maybe this just hits a bit differently because, like,
I remember when everything went downhill.
It was that day.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. Something about this didn't quite click for me. I'm not quite sure what it was. Like, I enjoyed all the directorial choices. I thought they were incredibly strong. Like the amount of mirror shots that just blew my mind. Strong use of Dutch angles. Like, they were almost at the point of overusing it, but like the situation is weird enough that you can use as many Dutch angles as you want. Really strong use of light and shadow. Just really, really strong like direction choices. But I don't know. Like, the moral just ended up being, you can only be young once, and that's a great moral. Don't spend the rest of your life chasing the highs of youth. But I don't know what kind of tone it was ending on. It was kind of bittersweet, but it felt very, very open-ended, not quite. Maybe that's the intention. Like, I don't know. Maybe I just haven't reached a point in my life where I feel that yet, so I don't quite emotionally connect to it.
It does depend on the upbringing. It's just like how you, what kind of child did you have, and what kind of what reminiscence you think things were as good as they were, but maybe they weren't. And it is entirely based on perspective on how this hits you. I feel.
I think bittersweet is the right note to end on, because if you try to go home again, and you'll see things, you'll remember some things the way they were, and then you realize, no matter how close you get or how close it's recreated, you can't actually recapture that. And so I think that bittersweet hits. And Rod's closing narration is fantastic again. That, he'll wish he can't go home, and then he'll smile because he realizes it's just a silly fantasy. And I want to back up a little bit and talk first about beautiful, probably the most beautiful episode. And we've done some other episodes like The Obsolete Man where they have very stark sets, just like a table and a door, and the podium is like, that's the entire set. And this, they reused a set from a big motion picture, so that helped to have that. They didn't shoot like on location. But like you said, the Dutch angle, the mirror to mirror shot at the beginning, where that shows you. This, I think, is the only time they show someone quote entering the Twilight Zone.
Yes,
the whole feel of it felt really like you're in the zone. That you're in another place. The tracking shot as he's running through the city at foot level. They do a big crane shot at the carousel. The tight shot on Martin's face when he's eating the ice cream cone and trying to remember Mr. Wilson and have I been here before and that kind of stuff. A quote from the director Robert Stevens. I was doing tilt shots on the Hitchcock shows and started doing them for the Twilight Zone. It's to heighten whatever the moment is, I felt, to exaggerate the fantasy and the craziness. Instead of the normal 3 days for principal photography, they shot this over a week and a win over budget, which meant the director was not coming back. But you can really feel the amount of effort that went into this compared to some other episodes, which are a lot more stark. When he first sees his parents, Idle, you had tell me what you were thinking at that moment, because you said you didn't realize it was a screen door. You thought it was kind of shooting.
I don't know. Just because the camera is intentionally faded, I didn't know if that was like a weird directional choice to say like they were looking at another mirror or a mirror of his past. But then it found out it's like, oh no, it's just a screen door. It's what they have in America. Like that's.
Quote Rod Serling, I thought it would be terribly interesting to see the mother and father through the screen door, he said, because they were in a sense ethereal. So I wrote in the script, shoot the mother and father almost as if they were seeing ghosts. This was the writer suggesting something to the director that was visual. So, yeah, and just in terms of, and George C. Clemens, director of photography, I don't think gets enough credit because he has a lot of strong installments. And this to be episode 5 of a series, to show that much range, I think is very impressive.
Frank?
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's...
sorry, Stream
Frank,
delay
you
gets
go.
us all in the end. Go on. Go on, Frank.
Well, I'll agree, the cinematography was really outstanding. And, when you consider this is late 1959, when they shot and aired this, using a lot of techniques that really aren't used that much today. Because to your point, Stars, depending on your age, depending on your life experience, a person could view this episode and say, I don't... If I gave you the list of the top 10 rated Twilight Zone episodes, you could very well watch this episode and go, there was some neat stuff, but I don't see how this is top 10. And then you could also have a different life experience or memories or things that were evoked from this where you go, holy God, this is just an all-timer. That's what it did to me. And another thing that I loved was the sound design, I guess specifically the music or the background soundtrack.
Music was excellent.
Very different. It was a very upbeat, light, ethereal music going where you're not sure, are you in the real world or not? Is it like a fantasy music? It was just very straight. It always carried the scene that it was with. And at first it always had you guessing because you knew something was wrong when he went to the soda shop and sat down and started asking for a soda, and you got this, barkeep, the soda jerk as they are. That's the one thing that always bothered me is that guy acted differently than he treated him very differently. He basically acted like, oh God, this again. This has happened 8 times already this month, and now here we go, another fucking time travel. Okay, buddy, yeah, sure, what you want? Okay. He was not at all shocked or acting anything. He was just very dryly doing his lines. Everybody else did a very good job, except for maybe the age of the main actor. But
so that was part of Rod Serling initially said this was his favorite episode, and I think we've already said that several times in the series.
I was going to say, that's at least the last 5 episodes.
But he went back and criticized his script quite a bit years later, and one of the things he mentions is that scene because they said it doesn't make sense, right, for him to come up, talk about Old Man Wilson and the soda jerk to not mention it, not affect him at all, and then go back to talk to it. Doesn't make sense, except that they do that for that little bit of a mid-episode twist where they open the door and, oh, there's Mr. Wilson, and part of it is just to do a twist, part of it is to show that, okay, he's gone back in time now. In case you hadn't picked up on that yet. So, he has some other nitpicks that on the surface I agree with, but they also it was done in a way to highlight something else. So,
yeah, actually, I want to pick on that point actually, because the moment you said that thing about, oh yeah, the soda jerk acts weird and it's he shouldn't have but at the same, and it's yes, that is the logical progression of events, but at the same time, I appreciated the episode just laying the card on the table really, really early and not holding it back.
Yeah, that's what
I felt like it being. Yeah, I was thinking about it, it doesn't make plot sense. It doesn't make logical sense. But for the narrative, I feel like it's stronger to do that. So I can kind of see where Sterling's coming from on that point. But I'm also I kind of don't care though.
I like that whole transition between where you're. In my head, I'm going, okay, Twilight Zone, and I'm doing the guessing games early on, and I'm thinking, what's the thing here? And obviously, he's going back to his old neighborhood town. I'm thinking, and you're starting to get those little pieces arranged there, where it's just okay, old Charlie used to drive things over there, and this is an old Bentley and things like that, or old cars, and you start to think he's either seeing things into his past, and then they kind of, they kind of pull the rug under you by kind of, and say no. This is the past. He has walked into the past. And yeah, like you say, I appreciate they didn't sort of tease you the whole way. They just went, no, he's there, and now he then starts to get clued into it as well. And you kind of have a nicely paced progression between the two to when you get to the climax point of him talking to his father was a nice sort of epitaph of like all that kind of like progression through the episode. So I kind of appreciated the pacing of the episode more than anything.
The narrative structure is definitely different than a lot of Twilight Zones, and that might be what kind of throws you off. Because almost all of them have a big twist at the end. They spend, the first third building or introducing the characters, the middle third, developing the plot and the characters, and then the last third kind of builds up to the twist. And there's really no twist here. The twist is
the twist is the 35 cents for an extra 3 scoops of ice cream. That's the twist.
And even he's shocked by that.
I know. Like, Jesus.
Well, you have to deal with, it's open-ended. He drives off thinking, okay, how do I deal with not being able to go home, still wanting to go home? Can I recapture my youth?
No, he seemed to be quite he seemed to conclude a lot of his feelings. He sort of walked in very sentimental and walked out kind of, okay, this is my lot in life, and maybe I'll change that. You can't, and one of the quotes, and I've actually written this down, from the episode is, there is only one summer to every customer. And this says, you can't, in the other phrase, you can't go home again. Like, and I feel like our character, Martin Sloan, Martin, what was his name? Martin Sloan? No,
yeah, Martin Sloan.
Mm-hmm.
Martin Sloan. Yeah, I don't know if it was my bad handwriting. Martin Sloan. His character kind of goes through the phases of like, coming to terms with that. They say like he's the big businessman. He's come away to escape. He's like come to try and reclaim some of his past. He kind of gets a little bit more than he's asking for, but by the end of it, I feel like he walks away. Not without a twist, but more without a sense of reckoning. He knows, his sense of purpose now, or he's kind of found something he lost in going back in time. Like that was the one thing I felt was very good.
So his father, I mean, I had a good relationship with my father growing up, and it struck me the first time watching this. His father's very detached. Like he plays it very straight. If I saw, my father years after he died, I would be very emotional. I would go to him, try to hug him, and his father plays it very straight. And, I realized, well, when they introduced Martin Sloan to us, who is he? He's a prick. He's sitting there honking his horn. Hey, come serve me. Mm. And he works, works himself to death in New York City. He was raised a certain way, and so we see the man behind who he was raised. And his dad's not a jerk, but he didn't really give him a lot of love and affirmation and affection. Part of that is an era thing, and part of that is just who he is. And so when we see him then at the end, he actually kicks him out. He says, "You don't belong here." And he gives it to him kind of softly, but it says, this little boy, it's his turn now, and you have to go back, and you can find ways to be happy where you're at. But he's even the first one to say goodbye, Martin, and he kind of gently pushes him back out of the nest. So I found that really interesting.
Yeah, I think maybe part of the reason why this isn't quite hitting the same way for me is because I had a very different relationship with my father. And if I try and think of how this would play out for me, I can't pick a summer. I can't pick a time in my life where it was... Maybe that's part of the reason why it doesn't hit me, is because my life, or at least my life at that time, was always marked by something. There was never a summer of cotton candy and carousels and band concerts and, 3-scoop chocolate ice cream sodas. There was nothing quite so perfect. And maybe that's just my memory. Maybe that's just like you said, the different life experience that I've had. But for me, it was a little bit too perfect. And if I try and think about what it would be like for me, I would almost not want to go home again.
I think that's the disparity between sort of reality and sort of televised Hollywood. Very much televised Hollywood is kind of
I guess,
perfect suburban lifestyles, things like that. So, we're British as well. We have a very different view of these American cultures as well.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just a case of like, if I think of something, because the obvious comparison is like It's a Wonderful Life. And I feel like I came out of that with a bit more of a, because it doesn't really shy away as much from showing the the rougher aspects of of George's life in that. But I don't know, like for this, it didn't. Yeah, maybe it's just me. I feel like it might actually just be a case of my life and the way I've lived it and the relationship I have with my parents and my childhood mean I can't quite emotionally connect with this. Even though I intellectually recognize what it's saying, maybe it's just the way I am.
And I'm saying, like, I don't have, I don't either have like a perfect like something to go back to. It's more like a desire to sort of say, like, I'd love to go back to like the troubled childhood that I have with my parents, like, because they do, as I say, they divorced when I was very little, and like I never got the full picture till I was much older of what actually happened and things like that. So I'd love to go back to that moment before and just chat and talk and find out and get their opinion to their emotional level of what they were like back then, as opposed to like modern now, where it's a whole different story.
Yeah, I feel like that's actually a valid point. Like, if I could go back and talk to my father as he was at my age, which I know for a fact he looked almost identically like me, that'd be a very different prospect. Like, if the episode focused more on Martin's relationship with his dad or his relationship with his mother, I feel like I'd be able to I'd be able to dial in on it more, because that is something I have genuinely wondered about what my parents were like at that age. The Back to the Future thing, but instead it focuses more specifically on the experience of childhood, and while I understand what that's going for, I don't think I can dial into that particular headspace. So I feel like that's why it doesn't quite land for me.
The perfection, though, is it's in his head. It's his rose-colored glasses, and the bittersweet that he can't live there is the point. You know, he didn't have a perfect childhood either, but in his head it was perfect. He remembers the cotton candy. He remembers the band concerts, and what we're walking through is his memory of events, not the real events. So I think that's what makes it bittersweet. Is if it was a bad childhood, he wouldn't be nostalgic for it. He wouldn't want to go back. And the element really of going back to tell your younger self something, I think, is a stronger point than necessarily interacting with other people or trying to relive things. I mean, no matter your relationship with your father, Stars, wouldn't you want to go back and tell your younger self something like, this part of your life will turn out okay. Don't fret this. Don't worry about this. You can come out stronger the other side, and
will forever change.
Fall in love with Beast earlier. There's always something that we want to tell our younger selves, and we just can't. So.
Yeah, I feel like, if there had been a line of maybe him coming to a realization of this wasn't what it was really like, and like, there was this that happened this summer, there was that happened that summer, this is not exactly the way it was, this is just my memory of it, I feel like that would have snapped it a bit more. I guess I meant to just kind of infer that, but I didn't make that connection. In my brain, I was like, this is just like the unfiltered, this is how it was type thing. Because they go to the effort of showing him injure himself and have the limp, like that implied it was actual time travel rather than the memory, which was kind of something maybe muddled it a bit, maybe. Like, I definitely connect to your point about, like, if I could go back and tell my younger self something, I would definitely would. There's plenty I would tell him. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It is a genuinely one of those things where I think I generally am just viewing it differently.
Frank, what was your golden summer?
You know, and that's the funny thing, because I have to go back and remember, watching this originally when I was spending summers with my grandmother and watching this on, I told Otto she would record old syndicated shows that came on at the end of the day, when normally your TV would go to, and at least in America, our stations would go to the national anthem and the American flag, and then they'd go off the air for like 5 or 6 hours until the morning news, because there just wasn't enough content to air 24 hours a day. And the VCR was a new thing. It was only like 2 years old at that point, barely affordable for one in a household. My dad got it for his mother, my grandmother, to record things for me to watch, because she was off doing something. So the TV raised me, and a VCR raised me during the summers. And I watched this episode then, and it had a different effect on me as a kid than it would as an adult, because I obviously viewed it differently. The message came in very differently. But those summers didn't happen for me like they did in this. And I have to think, like, now, if I had some weird time traveling, oil change place, a Jiffy Lube that lets me go 25, 30 years back in the past, like, what would, you go up to your younger self and say, hey, this is going to happen to you, or this is coming up, don't worry. I have a feeling my younger self would say, you know, pervert, stranger danger, somebody call the police.
Hmm.
Who is this weirdo? And in this, that kind of does happen. And then, the parents, the mom slaps him with the softest, most loving slap of all time. Love tap, really. But the dad, like you mentioned, gives his firm, like, the boy will be okay, but you need to go. Like, that that was a tough summer for this guy. That's what he's reminiscing about and loving, with his upbringing that turned him into this New York City power broker vice president guy. But I certainly didn't have that.
So, and something else has just crossed my mind literally just now. I was just thought, how would I feel? Because obviously I've got a couple of boys. How would I feel if one of my two sons turned up at my door, age 35, and went, "Hi, I'm your son," or I encountered them in some point in the wild. Like, as the dad, how would I feel at that situation? Like, what would I want to do? And if let's say I genuinely believed that they were one of my sons that have travelled from the future to now. Like, what would I do in that situation? On the flip side, like,
so there's two sides of the coin here. There's how the story has affected Martin, but there's also how it affected his dad. Because if that happened, like you say, how would that change how you raised your son from that point forward? It's not just your son coming back. Your son comes back and says, "Dad, I'm miserably unhappy. I'm stuck in this dead end life. I can't see a way out, and I desperately wanted to come back." And so, after he leaves, you must be stuck with the thought of, well, I must have failed as a father for him to end up like that. What can I do from this point forward to make? And we do see he is sweeter at the end. He's nicer to the oil change guy and to the soda jerk, and he seems to have at least mellowed a little bit. So there's sort of a two-way street there. I want to pull a little bit from Serling's original script, which because it's not all cotton candy and band concerts, but they do emphasize that in the final script. In the original script, a little bit less so. Rod Serling is such a writer. He speaks in prose, and even his aside and stage directions sound like final scripts. So a couple of asides here. When he first meets his parents, Martin grabs his mother. He's beyond logic now, beyond caring. He has one single preoccupation, and this is to prove who he is. He grabs his mother. I thought that was kind of powerful. A medium close shot, Martin, as he steps out of the shadows and comes into the periphery of a light thrown by one of the lampposts. He looks tired now and yet compelled. His face is tense, nervous, but gradually softens as all the sounds and the music penetrate his consciousness, and once again he succumbs to the poignance that comes with nostalgia. He's just writing like, maybe film it this way, but he writes like the whole script over again. These and a couple other things I think are not quite as happy-go-lucky. The scene where they leave part of it in the final script, where at the end where his dad asks him, "You know other things too, don't you?" And the original script said, "You also know when your mother and I, when we'll ... meaning when we'll die." And Martin says, "Yes, I know that too." And his dad says, "Don't tell me. There's a saying, every man is put on earth condemned to die. Time and method of execution unknown. That's a part of the mystery we live with. It must always be a mystery." And then he stands up and then at the end, Martin is the first one to say, "Goodbye, Dad." And then his dad, quote, or in parentheses, gently says, "Goodbye, son." So the first draft is a little bit less about the happy nostalgia and a little bit more about him trying to find out what went wrong in his childhood that has turned him into the man that he is. And so I think maybe if they'd kept more of the original in, maybe you would have a different, come away thinking a little bit differently.
Yeah, because it's one of those things where it's like, Sloane does come across as a bit of a dickbag in the beginning, but I feel like he softens quite quickly. Like, especially by the time he gets to the soda place, I don't feel like he's really being a dick there. He's kind of like, he's a lot more conversational, he's a bit more relaxed. Like, he seems like he's just like in a bad way at the beginning of the episode. And I don't feel like he's necessarily a bad person. I don't feel like he's necessarily a failed individual. It's just a case of he's unhappy, which, I don't know, maybe that's meant to be the same thing, but it's just a case of like, sometimes you just get burned out. Like, I don't know if it was necessarily if the intention was that like his father failed and was meant to have done a better job, then yeah, I guess that's a different kind of story to it. But I didn't really get that from the episode.
One other thing that that Rod criticized that it struck me as weird is that the certain pacing, the pacing in a certain area after he meets his parents for the first time and they kind of push him away. He goes and has a chat about rumble seats with the next door neighbor. I'm like, hold on, if I just met my parents from 30 years ago and had a conversation with them, like I would not be able to focus and rationally have conversations with other people, and then they kind of just skip forward to like 6 hours later. As
you just sort of like kind of go, okay, this is unreal. I need to go and do something a bit more normal. You might sort of just kind of go, let me just sort of decompress on this other person right now. Perhaps.
One of those things where it's like we can't exactly pull on our experiences of having met our parents at our age.
Yes, exactly.
So how we would react is a bit, hard to call.
No Marty
but I think
McFly's
Rod
here.
might be onto yeah, I feel like Rod is kind of onto something like that. I feel like that would knock you off your kilter a bit more than what's portrayed. Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, well, before we start wrapping up, then, because this is kind of the last episode of our Twilight Zone series, I want to talk a little bit about where this sits in the show run. This was episode 5 in airing. So let me read a little bit about this. Walking Distance almost didn't get made after Serling first pitched to CBS network Vice President William Dozier. Serling's original pilot was called The Happy Place, about a futuristic society in which senior citizens, once they reach the age of 60, are moved off to camps and systematically eliminated for not being useful anymore. Which reminds me a lot of that TNG episode with David Ogden Stiers. You remember that? Half-Life? Yeah, with Loxana Troy. Very heavy for a pilot. Twilight Zone producer Buck Houghton, along with Serling, presented some of these scripts to Dozier after the production of the sale of the pilot called Where Is Everyone, which is the actual pilot. Houghton recalled how the pilot that actually aired was still plausible, but Dozier was resistant to accepting episodes that waded deep into the waters of the liminal Twilight Zone. The pilot could have happened. The next script that Bill Dozier read, though, was Walking Distance, about a guy who walks into his hometown hale and hearty and comes back with a limp that he got as a child. And the network exec said, bullshit, this doesn't work. Who the fuck is going to believe this, Rod? That's a quote, by the way. We got through a few 2-hour conferences trying to convince Dozier, and the next time I heard of it, Bill was totally supportive. He'd been convinced to jump off the deep end, and he was with it. So when sponsors started to say, hey, what is this? He said, that's what you bought. He acted like he had never had any objections in the first place, which was great. Bill took the stand that no one's going to understand this, and Rod said, look, we're asking audiences to suspend their disbelief for half an hour and just enjoy themselves. People are going to walk out of a door in the 20th century and walk into the 18th century. That's what the Twilight Zone is all about. Many times I myself told Rod Serling this won't work, but when he stuck with it, I knew I was wrong.
Wow. The power and suggestive ability of Rod Serling to sell you on anything. Even Oasis brand cigarettes.
He knew his craft.
The smoothest, more mild than the mild drag that you can have to...
All right, I'll throw out 2 more quotes then before we wrap up, because I found so much more background material on this than any other episode we've done so far. So it's definitely been a touchstone for a lot of people. Another Buck Houghton quote, actors responded to Rod. I got actors who'd never worked in the medium. I used to get, gee, thanks, Buck, but I don't do television. Then they'd read Rod's stuff and say, I've got to do that. Lead me to it. A director of photography, George C. Clemens, said about this episode, director Robert Stevens was very knowledgeable about cameras. He was pushed, and I was kicked in the ass a lot by Buck Houghton and CBS to get things going. But Rod was right behind me. He told me do anything that was right. No one was better to work with than Rod. He was a guy you could go and lay your problems on, and he'd solve them. So we must have at least one Rod fest in every episode, and I think that's it.
God damn it. Where's the Rod Serling of 2024? Come on. Why? Let us have more Rod Serlings and less Gene Roddenberry's. No, I don't know.
J.J. Abrams.
Yeah, that's a dated reference. I mean, 2009 was a while ago now. Come on.
As Star Wars fans, how much they like J.J. Abrams.
It's our Star Trek fans, how much they like J.J. Abrams. Like, there you go.
He is right, though, that Twilight Zone is one of the most beautiful things to ever hit TV.
About that, anyway.
Anyway. Okay, time to move on to... Bread. A final bread for the Twilight Zone for this run. The moment that stood out to you for this episode. I'm going to very quickly take the lead on this. I'm just going to go with one line, and this is the one line that stood out to me for the whole thing. There is only one summer for every customer. And that just stood out to me as the quote of the episode, really. And that kind of highlights the whole thing. Is like, you only get your one chance. And that's my bread of the episode. Frank, what was your bread?
I don't want to take away from anyone else, so once again, I will take something that just tickles me to this day, and it is when he leaves the soda shop after vexing the soda jerk greatly. We meet Mr. Wilson, Old Man Wilson, in his chair, who is disturbed from his weird afternoon slumber to be told they need to order more chocolate syrup. And then he goes right back to his slumber. And it just made me wonder what is going on in this man's life that he must sit in the back of a soda shop. He needs his own episode.
Story?
Yes, we need to know
What
more
went wrong
about
in
Old
his
Man.
late age with maybe your
See,
childhood?
that's another age thing, because in a couple of years, Frank, you're going to really get that part of the episode.
Yes, and it was the tale of the middle-aged man, the boy, and the old man, and that was there. Yes. See, you got to think
in the back of a soda shop. That's the
fifth dimensionally. They warned you at the beginning. We're going to the fifth dimension, and it was the back of the soda shop.
Auto. What was your...
I'll make a sandwich with Idle, because it's the same conversation. That little boy, this is his summer, just as it was yours once. Don't make him share it. That's such a cruel, yet true thing to say. Yeah, it's not just you can't go home again. It's like you had your shot and it's gone now. And it's such a mean thing to have to internalize, but everyone has to internalize it at some point. And that doesn't mean your life can't be good from here on out. That doesn't mean there's not band concerts yet to come. But what was, and you can't have it again. And that's just, it's like pulling the Band-Aid off. But, that's evidently advice that his father never gave him growing up, and that will help him going forward, hopefully.
My bread would probably be like a lot of directorial choices. Like just all the Dutch angles, the mirror shots are fucking gorgeous. Like that really intense light on adult Martin as all the kids just kind of file out. It felt so weird, almost like like that feeling when you're the only person left in an amphitheater and everyone's like you're kind of filed out alongside beside you and you're the only one left. Like everyone's just leaving you behind. And even though it kind of breaks the thing of he's back in time and things are happening back there, it felt almost staged, like to make a point, but I didn't mind it because it made emotional sense. And I did appreciate the visual language of him just like constantly chasing his younger self around on the carousel, like chasing that childhood. Yeah, it's just I think it's the visuals of this one were really what stuck out for me. Just that's what my bread is. There was a lot of really good bread in this episode.
It's real
the chase of his younger self, which ends up hurting him, by the way, because
yeah. Was that a kind of
nostalgia
thing?
is...
Was that? Did he always have a limp before that, or was that a result of him interfering in the
No,
past?
he caused it, but that's well, and you can say it's a real physical thing, but yeah, the point is that if you keep chasing nostalgia, it's at the cost of your own life now, and so that's the message that they want to get.
And
across.
you will never quite reach it, and you will hurt yourself doing it. Yeah, it's a very strong visual metaphor.
Okay.
We'll revisit that in a minute.
Yeah. Sure, we'll go back to the past and the beginning of this episode and we'll change everything. Okay, how about, instead of changing the past, let's change the near future.
Well, if that's the best they could do, this should last about 5 minutes.
5 minutes. We will retrace our steps and figure out what's going on.
You've got 5 minutes. Do it.
Bake some bread in 5 minutes, please, gentlemen. And how would you change the final moments of this script? Frank?
I wouldn't change a thing about the final 5 minutes. I would change one thing about the first minute.
Oh, hang on.
I'm going to break your own rules here. Yes. I just to add to the total mindfuck of it, I would have him pull up to the Jiffy Lube, honk the horn, being a dick, and I would have him open the car door and complain about, oh, I've been in this car seat too long, and get out and limp. And have him limp from the beginning. So when he knocks himself off the merry-go-round in the end and somehow mangles his own leg like he's Dr. House or something, and he limps for the rest of his life, he caused his own limp. He's in a time loop.
I thought you were going to say like the guy at the pump was actually him in a different future or something like that. Oh no.
Truman Show.
I can't Truman Show this one. Don't give me a chance. I think my final 5 minutes would have been something along the lines of like similar kind of thing. Like he'd keep trying to change the past. He'd keep trying to chase after his younger self, and inadvertently, probably instead of like trapping the leg under and doing that, he'd actually trap his head under and kill himself, and then he'd just loop. My head goes back to the film Looper. If you've ever watched that, he had, with Bruce Willis and the kid from Third Rock from the Sun.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
That's the one, yeah. And yeah, he ends up sort of, spoiler alert for Looper, that many decades old film. He ends up wiping himself out from existence. But yeah, that's kind of where I'd lead that one for my last 5 minutes. How about you, Stars?
This is tricky for me because I feel like that 5 minutes kind of has to stay intact in order for the moral to work. I guess like the only thing I can do is change it to be more personally like in kind of inclined with me, and I would have that conversation with him and his dad, kind of bring up the fact that this is not how it was. There were parts that sucked. There were parts that there was never a summer that was quite like this. There's always rough parts, and you can erase those parts in your memory as you go, as you get further and further away from it until it becomes this glistering, totality that you constantly chase. But it was never quite like that. You need to live in the moment. You need to live in the now, and acknowledge that in another 25 years, the moments you're living now will be just as far away, and you need to appreciate them while you've got them. And then I would probably place more of an emphasis on Martin trying to turn over a new leaf. I don't know if I'd go so far as to have him quit his job or whatever. I feel like that's such an obvious solution. But like you say, maybe just put a bit more emphasis on the fact that maybe he's a bit nicer now and make that a bit more.
Yeah, if this was a Hollywood film, he'd be running his own sort of like cola shake shack and selling them for $10 each, wouldn't he? Yeah, that would be the.
I feel like that'd be so obvious. Yeah,
that'd be the full.
He becomes a blogger in 1960.
Yeah. So no, I feel like have him search out someone else and make more friends and be less lonely. I feel like would be what he would have to be doing. That's what I'd probably make him do.
Is his father breaking character there and being like, Martin, this isn't how you remember it? So like, as though he's omniscient.
Yeah, I feel like you could almost kind of blend Idle's idea in mind, where maybe he actually ends up getting himself killed, and it breaks the illusion, it breaks the time travel, and then his father's the only one left, and then he's kind of the avatar that tells him like, look, you had this one chance.
Get Matrix now.
You can't have it again.
Yeah, like Ghost of Christmas Past.
Yeah,
a little bit. Like I wouldn't hate that.
Yeah,
just like
inspired, isn't it?
Well, there's a little bit of an aspect to that, yeah. And just like you can't, like you say, you can't go home again. Don't try; it'll only hurt you. You got lucky this time, in that we're going to fix this, and you'll walk away from it unscathed. But take the lesson and apply it, kind of thing. I feel like, that's kind of how I go for it. And I wouldn't mind his dad being omniscient, because it's the Twilight Zone. Like, you can kind of get away with that. Everything's already off kilter and a bit weird, and having his dad be given eldritch knowledge or just the power of the narrative wouldn't hurt it, because he's kind of already in that role anyway.
The old gods, why have you done this?
Like, he's kind of already in that role of telling Martin the moral of the story. I don't feel like making it more oblique would really hurt it. But yeah, I don't know. Like you said, the last 5 minutes, as they are, kind of have to maintain to maintain the. It's just me trying to sculpt it into a shape that's more amenable to me. But I don't feel like that was.
So your last 5 minutes are the last 5 minutes of the show.
Hey, everyone gets one.
That's true.
Hey man, I guess what? I gave you an idea of what it would be like. I would just make mine a twist. I'm just admitting that my 5 minutes sucks.
You always get one.
That's okay.
Auto.
Mine also sucks because I have to give you something, but I don't like it as much as the original ending. When he's chasing, and this is, I guess, longer than 5 minutes, but he's chasing Martin, and young Martin, instead of him falling and hurting his leg, he gets hit by a car, and we cut, and he's waking up in a hospital. Young Martin is, and his family's there, and you've been in a coma for a week or whatever, and he finally regains consciousness, and he manages to get out of the bed, go to the bathroom. I don't know, use the bathroom or whatever, and he sees in the mirror old Martin, and old Martin is in his younger self again, and he gets to redo it. He gets the chance that he always wanted to live life again, and I don't like it because no one should get that chance. But if you're gonna do it, I think the shock of him dying, getting hit by the car, and then they could do some great shot of his older reflection in the mirror, I think could be interesting.
Yeah, I can see the value in that.
Okay, let us go on to...
I can show you my rating code.
Schiller rating 3.5.
Associational rating norm -3.
That's much too low a rating.
Is not accustomed to seeing
I'm not accustomed to seeing an unsatisfactory rating on a member of my crew.
Oh, there's not enough bread for this. Okay, our rating, please, gentlemen. Frank, as our honoured guest this week, do you have a rating criteria for us?
Oh, it's probably not going to be as good as yours. But gentlemen,
count it.
Don't oversell it.
No, Dan Javin is truly the rating criteria. Dan and Stars are the rating criteria experts on this. We are merely filling in.
They're both scarily good, eerily good almost.
How many illusions of a horse and tango?
Oh my god, that's still my favourite.
Gentlemen, how many sleeping, disturbed from his sleep for chocolate syrup, old man Wilson in his comfortable chairs, out of 10 would you give this episode?
Go Frank. Go on, Frank. How many disturbed from his sleep for his syrup?
It's not
rolls right off the tongue.
It does.
Disturbed from his sleep, old man Wilson. Sorry about that.
I was thinking about loving slaps from your mother, but it's not the perfect episode. It's not the best episode, but it resonates for me. For aforementioned reasons, and it's got, I think, a good moral, and it's just one twist away from being an all-timer. I'm going to give it a 9.1.
9.1 what?
A 9.1. Old man Wilson in his chair comfortably, yet disturbed in his slumber to order more chocolate syrup.
She sells seashells on the sea. What? Okay. Stars. What would you give it?
Of the many old man Wilsons sitting comfortably in his chair, disturbed for more chocolate syrup out of 10s, I would have to give this an 8. I'd have to give this an 8. I feel like I've spent a lot of this review saying this wasn't for me. It's still a great episode. I think directorially it's a fucking tour de force. I think it's got a really strong sound direction. I think the soundtrack is great. Performances are good. There's just a lot of style and a lot of there's a lot of heart went into this. It just doesn't personally work for me, and I can't really count against the episode, so I have to say it is great, but it's not perfect because, by my own metric, perfect would mean I would want to watch this a million times over and over again. But guess what? I would much rather watch The Silence than this, because it personally appeals to my tastes, and that is how these ratings should go. So 8, comfortably resting old man Wilson sitting in his chair, disturbed from his rest for chocolate syrup out of 10.
Go on,
Idle.
Aldo. Oh, okay.
Idle, go ahead.
I'll run an impasse now. Okay, fine.
Mexican standoff.
I would as much as I've said like how much this sort of resonates with me, I probably would do an 8.5 for this. Not my favorite episode of the Twilight Zone, but certainly a lot to think about. Certainly puts a nice twist, and I really like the pacing. I really liked how they teased out the twist in it, and like, you know, they sort of use you're guessing from like, oh hey, is this guy just walking down memory lane, or no, he's actually not only in memory lane, he is in the past. I love the pacing. I like the camera shots. I feel like it didn't tread enough away from whimsy for it to earn a few more points, but it definitely resonated with me, and I enjoyed it a fair amount. My only thing is I'm thinking of other Twilight Zone episodes that I've enjoyed and gone, yeah, I really enjoyed that. For like as an episode of TV, I might watch it maybe one more time and go like, yeah, I'm happy with that. So 8.5. 8.5 sleeping disturbed from his sleep, old man sleeping Wilson's out of 10 for me. How about you, Otto? He is definitely.
You have an acronym for that, by the way?
Yeah, slap.
That's what I thought it would be. Yeah, this is an easy 10. And if I try to think objectively, no, it's clearly a 10. You guys are smoking crack. If I try to think objectively about episodes, probably this and To Serve Man are the most complete whole episodes of the series, and just, you know, television in general. It has the best score by a mile. Thank you, Bernard Herrmann, for that. It's top 3 in terms of pure cinematography. The shots, the storytelling, the stuff that it said without saying it, the screen door between Rod and whatnot, that spotlight when life is passing him by, he's standing still and it's passing him by. They do so much with 22 minutes. It almost feels like a feature-length film. The acting of Gig Young is impeccable. He's got this great quality to him, this yearning for something simpler. But his confusion is totally understandable. I think the storytelling of, and it is reductive to say you can't go home again, but that and wanting to communicate with your past self, I think is such a universal concept. It hits on all cylinders. And the only thing that I didn't really love with some of the story pacing issues are things that Rod Serling himself criticized. So I feel like I'm on solid ground with that one. But it's just beautiful. It from top to bottom, you can tell they spent more than 3 days filming it. It's so good. It's objectively great. So an easy 10 for me.
Well, at the end of that brings this episode to an 8.9. And now we've finished this first run. I don't want to say it's the first run of Twilight Zone episodes, because I'd like to explore some more stuff. These are the best of the best that Auto's picked up, so hopefully in the future we'll do some more on this. Maybe we'll do something else. But I'd just like to throw to you guys an average of all of the Twilight episodes we've watched so far. Currently stands at 308,972. But if we take away Auto's 21,906,600 score from The Long Morrow, we've rated the Twilight Zone at an 8. And I feel like, for what we've watched together, for something or interchanging Dan for Shy, for other guests we've had along the way.
Frank,
yes. Yeah.
That guy there.
This guy right here. So that's what happens when you look at your spreadsheets more than the actual people in front of you. Yeah, I have thoroughly enjoyed this run of Twilight Zone. Like I say, for me and Stars, this is our first time watching it. I want to go. I'm half and half. I want to go and watch it all, but also I kind of want to be presented to it like this. I want to be introduced to it by Auto, and just like, this is why I love this episode, and just kind of go, okay, now I want to explore these with other people.
Well, yeah, there's episodes where everyone is going to at least like it, but there's also episodes where the volatility kind of works in its favor, where it's like, I don't really love it, but there's going to be people who can't get enough of it, and so they do a pretty wide range of. It's not just sci-fi and fantasy. We get a couple Hitler references. You get some westerns. You get some gothic horror stuff that goes much darker than what we've seen so far. So, the strength of the anthology, but just a wonderful series, and I'm really happy that you guys have shared it with me and that you guys are watching it with us.
No, thank you, Auto, for introducing. Like, this was your idea. This was kind of your baby to say, like, let's do some Twilight Zone. And I'm like, I'm so glad we've spent sort of like the last.
And I've started pushing it on people at work. I love it so much.
Yeah. This is episode 17 episodes we've done of this, and like every single one I've enjoyed in some way or another. We've not rated.
I've genuinely been like, should I ask Brody to watch some of these again? Because I feel like I'm kind of down for it. Sharing it is cool.
We've not rated anything lower than, I think the lowest thing we rated was the Hitchhiker,
right? Yeah.
5, and like 5 is just like, it's still good. Like, it's just middle.
Which I've watched some reviews since then, and people are like, "Oh, what a stunning episode! It's in my top 2. It's my favorite. It's really stuck with me." So stuff like that alone tells me that there's a lot of episodes yet floating out there that is going to hit that way for everyone else, even though it may not have made this first list.
And anyway, we're going to review Code of Honor tomorrow. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, can we get back to Star Trek Season 1? That'll really grease the gears.
Get us in the mood. No, it's been good to do something uplifting, but we'll do more. We'll do some other stuff as well. But thank you everyone for watching our indulgence in the holodeck. We'll do some more stuff like this as well as our regular stuff. But no, thank you, Auto. Thank you, Frank, for joining us this week. And as always, everyone, stay remembering. See you later.
That's awful. No. Stay nostalgic, dipshit.
Oh, well.